Okay, welcome. We're live. Actually, I'm recording live, but this is not going to be broadcast live. Hey, I'm working on the final stages of the Ina Ethereal Reveal painting. So this is a preview of what's eventually going to go out. First, for my patrons on Patreon, who get all the first exclusive looks at this painting as I'm working on it over the last couple of weeks, but this is also the first look at the final element. So the final element it is going to be this hummingbird that I want to add to this final piece here, because my last couple of paintings have had flight themes associated with them. So like going back to the last painting with Evelina, we had the falcons, and prior to that we had the butterflies, and before that I think we had the spirit eagle. So with this one, it's kind of a last minute addition, but I'm kind of excited to add this to here. So let's see what happens. I'm going to be doing this to where you can film, where I'm filming where you can see what I'm actually painting. So here we go, and I'm going to kind of talk through this and see how this pans out. So I'm going to do this on the very final top layer. I'm going to start by taking black, taking my very first tool that I like to use, which is this round brush here, and I'm just going to start blocking in and drawing the hummingbird on the left, which is the photo reference. So here I go. I'm going to start off with, let's see how okay, that's kind of light, so I'm going to thicken up that brush. That should work fine. Opacity, I'm going to drop it down. I think that's good, maybe a smidge bigger. So the nice thing about working digitally is that I can start blocking this in at almost any size and then scale it down later. So here's my first stage, just working on getting the basic shape. So I'm kind of going with the body there. And by the way, I've never drawn a hummingbird before, so this is like new for both you viewers and myself as I take this project to the next level. So, and I kind of like working with, especially with the last few paintings, adding some kind of real element, and in this case it's this hummingbird, because everything else is pretty much fantasy. Even though, you know, drawing a human figure, I've got in this painting here, you know, I've got the backgrounds, the rocks, the mountains, those are definitely fantasy. The planets stacking up behind in the far distance. And of course I have clouds, but this hummingbird I think is going to really just kind of add that little touch. And again, it sticks with the theme of flight, which has been happening in the last few paintings that I've been including, and something I want to, at least for now, continue to incorporate. So my iPad Pro is getting a little marked up here. You know, I've got this glove here, this hand glove that covers the last two fingers, the pinky and this finger here, to prevent smudges as I work. But for the most part, you know, I can't help but still use my left hand to swipe across, pinch and zoom. So I use that little towel there to clean up the screen. So we're going to continue to block this little character in here. And you notice I'm just kind of really drawing it, blocking it in, not really worrying so much about the size. Not sure if it'll stay that size. That's rather large for a hummingbird. But you know, there is a fantasy element to all of this work that I'm doing here for my Realm Ethereal. So blocking this in here, I'm going to work on this wing, just getting the basic shape down. I'm going to do that. There's this little bit of delineation here, kind of like a breakup. I'm going to kind of indicate that here. Also looking at proportions of the wing. And once I'm pretty satisfied with what I have here, this looks a little off, and one thing I can do in this part here is select the beginning of that, and I can add a warp to it. So I notice there's a little bit more of a bend in the photo reference I'm using than what I have here. So I'm going to see if I can create something here digitally or adjust it digitally. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Let's see what happens. You know, that's not working out. I'm going to undo that. So looks like what I'll have to do is actually erase maybe part of it, or just keep working with it. I'm just blocking it in. See, as you're working on the fly here, I try to see what can be done digitally. There's a program that I use, which is Procreate, which is I think it's only on the iPad. Don't think it's available on desktop. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles that Photoshop has with regards to being able to make, you know, really tweak like drawings and kind of warp them and distort them and skew them. I mean, it has those features, but it's very limited, I think. But part of the reason why I like using Procreate is for that reason, in that it has it seems to me like the main focus for Procreate really is like to draw or to paint, and whereas you can do that in Photoshop, and artists have been for years. It's a little too bloated for my needs as far as art is concerned. So I like to take it to start with Procreate and start creating and painting within the application, because it just seems like it is so lightweight in that respect. And what I mean by lightweight is it's not bloated. It doesn't have, you know, levels, doesn't have curves. It doesn't, I mean, it's going in that direction from what I can see. And as I understand, you can even make animated GIFs in here, which is cool. But I like the fact that, like, the interface, like I have this one menu button here and I can access all my work. Pull that back up. I have, as soon as that loads, I've got these little things, which is pretty in-depth when you think about it. And yeah, you can see all these little things here. I tend to not think of this application as being something I would use for that, for any of those things like adjusting contrast, adjusting hue, saturation. Even though you can, I like to use, or I should say, I like to think of my iPad Pro as almost like literally a sketch pad. And I can just focus on the first phase of the creativity, which is, you know, it's more than sketching, but it's really just tied into, let's just draw this thing. So that's the reason why I like using Procreate. I tried a couple of years back. I did actually have it was a Wacom. It was one of the larger tablets, and it wasn't like a Cintiq, but it was one of their larger tablets. I'm not sure if I'm using the right terms. Is it a tablet or a stylus or some sort? It definitely did not have a monitor that interfaced to where I can draw and see on it, and it was mirroring what was happening. It's actually an input device that it had a pressure sensitive surface and all that good stuff, but nothing like the technology where it is today. So interestingly enough, once I finish this drawing, this entire painting, I will take it into Photoshop, and I actually use a smaller Wacom, one of the smaller tablets, to actually begin colorizing and painting these grayscale images, these paintings I do here, these illustrations in Photoshop using an older, or one of the newer Wacoms. So anyway, this is just the block-in phase for our hummingbird. I'm just going to go ahead and I just wanted to show you this initial phase of what I'm doing here, and so it looks like it's something definitely has potential. I'm gonna keep working on this. We'll see how this turns out, and as I get closer to adding details, I think what I'll do is I'll forward through that, or maybe I'll make a second video. But this is just the initial stage of adding the hummingbird into the Ethereal Reveal painting. So we're continuing here with our hummingbird character. So I'm just going to continue now to increase the opacity, because I'm pretty much like what I'm seeing here with the shape of the hummingbird. So now I'm going to just start actually solidifying the shadow form here. I should say the form, and it looks almost like this hummingbird appears to be a silhouette, almost like shadowed, and it really is a silhouette. So that's what I'm kind of aiming for right now. I just really need to block all this in because this is a method I think that's going to help me help speed up this process. So what I'm basically doing is just drawing the edges and the shape of this creature here, the hummingbird. So looking at this particular portion as I draw through, and I'm just going to see if I can get this to look as much as possible as like just a silhouette to start off with, and then we'll start painting in the details afterward. So this is like a method I like to use for certain types of objects or elements within a painting. The character figure Ina in this painting did not start out like this. And I suppose you could have, but it just seems to me that for certain things this could be a nice approach. Just something to also something that makes it it goes faster, but it allows me to focus on basically the form and then adding the details later. So like I rarely start with adding details in any figure, any animals or people, anything of that matter. I tend to focus on just like the broad shapes. Tend to think on what are the positive spaces and the negative spaces. So oftentimes, like in this case, in this instance, blocking in this hummingbird, we're zeroing in on the positive space, which is the space that the actual creature occupies in the picture. So all of this is positive space with regards to the hummingbird and its position, its placement within the composition, and everything around it. All this is all negative space. So it's important to, as you're drawing, or at some approach I like to use, it's important to think of not only the positive space in here, but also like the edges, which essentially is what creates the negative shapes. That's what I meant to say, negative and positive shapes. So here we go. This right here, I'm looking at that in the reference to kind of help me draw that through. I'm going to angle it up because I tend to have a natural stroke that goes from bottom left to upper right that just feels comfortable for me. So I'm just going to try and get this to just smooth out a little bit. Add that in there. So that's looking okay. That's looking good. I'm going to focus on this part right here. Pull that down. Let me zoom in here a little bit. Sometimes it's good to zoom in as you're like working on these edges here. And other times it's actually more beneficial to actually zoom out and see the overall image. But for right now, we're definitely trying to get this here as close to what I would consider satisfactory for this image here. And again, this is a reference of the hummingbird, not meant to copy it like literally as I see it, even though starting out I'm wanting to make the base as much as possible as similar as possible to the reference. So that's looking pretty good, I think. And we have a basic shape there. We're going to work up onto the head. So let's see, edge of that in there. Let me set that back so that I'm pretty much in line with it. Same rotation here. I did slightly rotate the image with respect to its placement. I don't know if you see that, if you notice that. Notice how the wings in this image closer to more parallel with the horizon. Here in my image, I've got it at a bit of an angle. Definitely not parallel, but did that so I can have somewhat of a repeating shape right here, because there's a repetition with like her upper arm, her lower right arm, and this right here. And I want to create like this dynamic that goes from here, her hair / tentacle type things coming out of her head kind of point to here. So everything's kind of pointing in this direction, which is her symbol. So everything's kind of pointing pointing, even to some degree this right here kind of, you can be argued that this draws the eye down here, but it's darker and it's lighter here, so I want to kind of just emphasize just this area right here. Plus it kind of hits that one of those sweet spots, right? And the rule of thirds, like if you take this entire composition here, if I go the top and here's that and that, you can see that, and then here left, there and there, so it's hitting right at this key area. Again, this is her mask. Initially I called them face plates because that's what it seemed like, but that seems a little too just a little too generic. But it's basically her symbol. She's a character, and in this universe of the Realm Ethereal, she is an ethereal, and she's ethereal of order. So that's her symbol. I came up with that symbol. It's a symbol for order. So that's a key element in this entire picture, and it'll probably be the single most, the high key brightness element on there. It's almost white here, as you can see. Actually, it is white, so by comparison, everything, your eye automatically just like kind of goes into that. So everything's trying to point toward that. Even with the hummingbird here, we have its beak, and even it is pointing toward it, right? So it's kind of like, there it is. So at any rate, we're continuing with just blocking in this hummingbird, and I think it's looking pretty good. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of shore up all these little light areas. I don't have to, but it's just something I like to do. The brush I'll use for that is this icon right here. I don't know if you can see that. I hope it shows up in the shot. This is the blend or the smudge tool. So basically what happens in Procreate is you have all these, you have a brush library, and these are all the different brushes you can use. Sketching, within sketching you have all these different types, inking, all the different types, calligraphy. So in this case I am painting again with the round brush, but now I'm going to switch to the smudge, and I'm going to use this I think it's called Nico Rule or Nico Roll. I tend to like that. It's a squared kind of it's basically like a flat brush, if you're familiar at all with flat brushes. I actually have one right here, so check this out. I'm going to reach across the chasm from my drawing board to my, I have a little taboret to my right here on the table. Now that's a flat brush right there. So if you see the shape, it kind of mimics that, right? So if I were to make this shape or this stroke with this brush, you know, it's a flat brush. So put that away. But this flat brush in this instance is being used as a blender. So I'm going to make something real quick here you can see. So see how that blends? Pretty cool, huh? So I like using that. Let me undo that. I like using this particular brush to just kind of come in here, and I'll zoom in and just kind of clear this up right here. Just kind of smudge it all together. Like that. That'll show up in the camera. I might post an actual time lapse maybe of this as well. Maybe I'll have it running alongside. Not sure. I'm fairly new to video editing this year, so that's been actually a fun way to put my work online and to give people something to look at other than just the images, the static images. So it's been fun doing that, and definitely a learning experience too. So I'm gonna just keep smudging away here, or blending. Now, one of the things I've been working on this year as an artist is trying to make my work not look so pretty, if you will. Even though the imagery or the subject matter may be pretty, you know, I've got birds, got butterflies, drawing powerful-looking heroes, and I call this both male and female characters. And painting them with my eye as far as what I like to paint and how perfect I can make them look in my artist's mind's eye. So I'm trying to not make stuff look so precious. Maybe that's a better term. And that's an expression I use because when I was in school for a time, I was at a California State University. Which I did not finish school, just so you know. I left once two things. Once I decided that I did not want to be in debt, and I just wanted to go to work, and I just wanted to make money, and I did. I went into the graphic design field in commercial printing, and it was been awesome because I actually learned so much about the software that I use today, which is Creative Cloud. But back then, it was just Adobe selling you the boxed programs. But I also learned a lot about graphic design, and I learned a lot about printing, and a lot of those things really did tie into what I'm doing with my art. So I was fortunate enough to, I left school, and I found a job at a commercial print company, and they took me in, and I learned a lot of different aspects of things that were just really cool. I mean, printing really is very cool. I don't think printing is dead. I think printing still has a life. Maybe I'm biased because I worked in that field for like over 20 years. But yeah, I don't think printing's dead. I mean, my ultimate goal with a lot of this work is to see it print, see it go to print. The Patreons out there, you know who you are. You're subscribed to my print collection, the subscription, and I think that's awesome. But I love it when I can actually take this work that has now become digital and can actually have it printed out, and you can see it and hold it, and yeah, you can smell it too, right? Ink on paper has a really cool smell, I think. So anyway, I've got this here blocked out, and I think I'm good. I'm gonna probably pause this video at the moment. My cat's crying out to me. I need to let her out or something, and then I'll get back to filming. Hey, we're back. Took a little break there. I'm going to go back now and refine some of the edges on this silhouette of the hummingbird. So what we're going to do is go through, and I notice there's a slight bend right here than compared to what I have. So I'm just going to try and see if I can get just a little more variety, or I should say more of this subtle change here. So it kind of goes up and then kind of goes down ever so slightly. Pretty subtle, and it might be too big of a shift here in my thing, and yep, sure enough, it's looking just way too, it's getting unwieldy pretty fast. So I'm going to just go click here and undo a few steps. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take my eraser tool, and in this case I'm going to use this round brush. It kind of has a softer edge to it, so I'm just going to use the eraser tool and see if I can kind of cut a part of it out of this lower part of the bird's wing. Yeah, I think that's a better approach. See, sometimes you have to realize that the tools you use, you think you might try to do one thing with it when you're thinking, oh, I need to add something. And sometimes you don't have to add, you have to subtract. All right, cool, something like that works. So I'm going to switch back to my brush. Try and get this to be just a little bit more pointed because it looks a little pointed there. I'm going to rotate that again, rotating it so I can get a more natural stroke with consideration to how I actually move the pencil here. Can kind of get more of a natural, like, pull down top to bottom feel to really round this out here. All right, cool. I think this right here is jutting out too much, so switch back to my eraser. I'm going to shave some of this off. Tighten that up a little bit. All right, cool. All right, so that's looking fairly decent. Another thing my eye just kind of picked up on is this portion of the wing, this back part here. So I'm noticing how it has a little bit more of, actually, now that I see it, I think I'm good. I think I'll only really need to maybe push this up a little bit. That'll kind of give it more of a sweep. Initially, my eye was seeing kind of like this sweep right here. And I think that's gonna, I'm gonna be able to pull that off when I start adding details to the bird itself. So that's pretty much complete. Let's go ahead and just smudge this here, clean it up a little bit. Yeah, just like that. Okay. So that, I think that looks good. Pretty satisfied with what I see so far. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting in some details. So I'm going to paint on top of this see if I can add a layer. Nope, I'm maxed out on layers. So this right here, I don't know if you can see it, maximum limit of 8 layers achieved, or maxed out. So the thing about Procreate is, depending on the size of the document, the resolution, the limit to layers the layer count is affected by that, I should say. So I'm going to give you a quick little look into my canvas here, and I'm going to show you my canvas information. So, okay, so that's pulling stuff up. My dimensions are 19.137 inches by 25.907 inches at a resolution, or a dots per inch, of 300. So what that does is it means that I can only use 8. You notice here, maximum layers, 8. I've used 8. And for those of you wondering, I'm at 50,534 strokes, and so far I have spent 20 hours and 35 minutes on this painting. And that's just the grayscale phase. So pretty cool, huh? Anyway, going back to the drawing here, I'm going to start adding let's see. I need some gray. I'm going to start adding some of these separations of color here, and we're going to start doing that by adding some tone, some halftones here. So I'm going to take my gray, still with the same round brush, and I'm going to start trying to build in this area, start blocking this area here. So we'll take the brush and start kind of adding that in. So if you notice, we're working on a completely dark background, the silhouette, black, right? So I'm going to cool this down a bit more. It's too warm for my liking. There we go, something cooler. All right, there we go. And from here, I notice there's just this shape right here. You have to forgive me, I don't know the parts of a bird, much less the actual parts of a hummingbird. I don't know if they have anything different body-wise, although I did do a little bit of research on the flight of hummingbirds, or how they fly. And I noticed the reason why they seem to hover and they can actually fly up and down and go backwards is because they have an ability in their wings to rotate the wing, I suppose. So they can basically make like a figure-8 rotation, or sweeps with their wings, and that allows them to achieve flight and movement forwards and backwards. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I think hummingbirds are actually just pretty cool overall, just the way they tend to hover and just dart around. I picture that like superheroes, like Superman flying around, just kind of hovering. That's one of my most favorite scenes of anything like with superheroes, is when they just levitate or float in air and they're just hovering. I think it's so awesome to see that. And so much as that, I can appreciate flight scenes of heroes in movies, superheroes, especially in Superman, like in Man of Steel, the scene where he first learns to fly. Pretty cool stuff there, but I love it when they're just hovering. There's just something like so awesome about just seeing that. So there's our hummingbird coming along and just blocking in some shapes that I see here. And you know that I've been working in grayscale for at least the last, I think this is the 5th painting now, I'm not sure. But I've totally been into this new approach, or I suppose it's an old approach, but it's an approach that really focuses in on the drawing aspect of a painting. And I think that's the reason why the last few paintings, at least in my opinion, I think I've really upped it for myself and as far as my game. And I've also been challenging myself by using more photo reference in that regard. So, but getting back to the grayscale painting, there's such an emphasis in drawing. And what I've been hearing lately and revisiting and almost relearning is that the paintings themselves, the final painting, if you've done your homework, if you've done the groundwork, if you've done the research, if you've planned the whatever storytelling elements you want, if you've done that to that nth degree, adding color is almost, it's like almost like what's the word I want to use? It's like academic or something. It's just like, okay, I figured out my composition. I've nailed the drawing. I've figured out what it is and where it is and how it is all supposed to fit. Adding the color is just, it's a different element, and it's something that takes importance once you get to that stage. But the key thing is, like, I don't even think about color until I have all these other elements figured out, or at least fairly, like 98% thought out. That's not to say that there's no room for spontaneity once I get to coloring. There definitely is. But for the most part, everything that I do when it comes to this grayscale painting beforehand, before going to color, is with an eye toward the drawing aspect. And what I'm doing here, even though I'm painting, there's a lot that has to do more with just figuring out edges, working on using reference, and then working on spatial relationships, again, like positive, negative space, seeing how things flow, seeing how things fit. And it's been tremendous, I think, and I think like my last few paintings have reflected that. At least, not saying they're great, but if I can like honestly look back at the initial paintings I did for this project, for my Realm Ethereal product here, back in 2018, I think, there's just so much more, I think, depth to what I'm able to achieve just by kind of revisiting and just kind of going back to basics in a way. I've just taken more time to think about composition, to use a good amount of reference, and to also kind of, let's see, what am I doing here? Let me thin this out here, to just really get back into the drawing aspect, focusing not on color per se, but thinking about value, thinking about how it is that I want to structure the image for a way that has impact, both like aesthetically and also like with composition and drawing. And what I mean by drawing is like the draftsmanship. And then kind of tying this all back into the first thing I said, I think, was like I've been trying to kind of loosen up my painting and my drawing so that things don't look too tight. I never liked my stuff to look like it was airbrushed. In my perfect world, like I like oil painting, but I'm just not set up for it here in my studio at home. Ventilation sucks. The handling of hazardous materials with like thinners and varnishes, and some of the toxicity that some of these paints have, because some of the paints are using like these heavy metals, right? You have your cadmiums and you have your chromiums and whatnot, stuff that you definitely don't want to get on your skin. I'm just not set up for that, but I'd like to have my paintings look like almost like pastel. So, or stuff that just has a certain amount of slop in it. I think when things look too airbrushed, too perfect, too tinny, and what I mean by tinny is like tin. Coloring just looks like it's just, I suppose, I guess what I'm talking about is probably like the lighting just looks too polished. It's funny because like I want my work to have a polished look, but I don't literally want it to look like it's like slick plastic, if that makes any sense. So let me get back to this here. So I think I've gotten some pretty good separation there of the values. At least we're starting in on it, right? So I'm starting in like definitely with the black, which is like 100%. That's like on the low end of the scale, right? Or maybe that's 0%, depending on how you think of a scale, grayscale. So I'm gonna call like black like 0, and this is like actually no, because I come from a printing background. Anything at a full 100% intensity is 100%. So like I would call this part here like maybe this is a 65 or 70%, not quite 50. Like this background by comparison might be at 10% as far as the value. So I tend to think in terms of, again, because of my printing background, think of grayscale, I think of halftones, I just think of numbers automatically that correlate to that, or I should say values, percentages. So I'm just going to kind of smooth this out a little bit here. We're going to keep on going. That's a pretty good size, I think. It might be rather large for a hummingbird, but I think given the scope of the image, I do want the hummingbird to stand out just a little bit more. So, I mean, I could shrink it maybe to 70%, but I do want it to have a nice size, so a decent size, even though it's a hummingbird. So still keeping it small. All right, so now let's continue. Let's put in a few key important landmarks before I move in. One of the biggest landmarks, I think, is an eyeball in this case. So I'm back on the black. I take, what brush am I on? Round brush, that's perfect. Okay, so let's just drop in the eyeball here. I'm just gonna kind of start painting it in. So yeah, that's looking, probably should be a little larger here. I'm gonna also make my pen size smaller, brush size, I should say. I can see that the eyeball is just a little set back too much. So here's what we're gonna do. Quick little fix. We're gonna take our selection tool and Procreate. I'm just gonna move the eyeball forward. I select uniform because if I don't, it might skew it. You want to keep the same shape, so I'm gonna move it forward. Move it down maybe. Let's see. Forgive the pun I'm about to make here, but I'm just gonna eyeball it. Okay. Good enough. Now I've got to fill that in, take my eyedropper tool, and then just, drop that color back in here. Doesn't have to be perfect. Blend it in, smudge it in, go back to black, take my brush tool, and let's see, I'm going to angle this so I'm kind of on the same tilt as what I see in the reference. It looks like it maybe is it's about right there is a good size. Still using black. All right. Couple of key landmarks. Again, I see like something here. There's just a darker shift in value right here. I don't know what that is. Probably just a marking particular to the species of hummingbird, perhaps. Don't know. All right, that's look good. And then from here, something kind of jutting out from its beak. You see this right here. Does that look? It's a little too firm, I think. I gradually build that up. We'll kind of go underneath the beak here. So again, I'm working in grayscale. Really, there's a lot of drawing, I think, that takes place at this point. And just kind of trying to figure that out. Kind of plot these points because they're going to be reference points eventually as I move into some of the higher values. Or I should see some of the high key values in here, which is going to be your colors that are at 50, no, not 50%, maybe 10, 20, 30 at the most. Those should be like the higher values. And then just kind of build the painting out from there. So from here, I'm going to move on to, let's see, a couple of more darker patterns. You know what's happening here is I need to probably cut in some mid-tone back into certain spots. I'm actually going to sample this area here, this this body part, or the torso part of the bird, and then I'm going to start cutting in some of these the wings here. So just going to start adding this in. I probably need a bigger brush size for that. The value is up, so I'm just going to start kind of dropping this in. You can see that. And you know, as I was plotting out this element to add in here, with the wings, I had thought, well, should I blur them? Should I make it look like it's in movement? And it crossed my mind, you know, to kind of have all this blurred. And I guess that's something I can experiment upon further once I bring this to the color phase, which will be not in Procreate, but it will be in Photoshop because of the nature of how I paint, which is through the use of gradient maps. At least, I like to say, at least for this stage. If there's anything I've learned, it's like I go through stages in my creative process, or phases maybe. Maybe phases is the more accurate term. A phase of a certain technique, a phase of a certain style, a phase of a certain compositional type of approach to my thought process when it comes to laying out images. But in this case, because I am using more gradient maps, or I'm using gradient maps to start adding color after I've done grayscale, it's just the particular spot I'm in right now. So that looks starting to look good. And what I wanted to do was start adding that in because I know that I need to have a little bit more contrast to kind of start picking out and going back in and adding some of the darker values. So in fact, what I'm going to do is take a larger brush and just kind of brush it, kind of glaze it in over here, over the entire piece, because I really just kind of needed to get it just to lighten up in value enough to where I can kind of reestablish some of these darker landmark spots in the painting. So looks good so far. So we're just going to kind of continue to kind of block in this area right here, just going in right in there and trying to get back into that form. Again, I'm taking this grayish color here. It's still in the cool range, cool hues here, but it's really a point now where I'm starting to kind of think about details at this point. I've done, I think, enough blocking in. I've done enough layering to where I have a decent representation of the character, the hummingbird. There's one thing bothering me right here. It looks like I can see like this socket, and I just kind of want to smooth it out. There you go. All right. So yeah, there we go. Our hummingbird. Our hummingbird is humming along. There's another bad pun. I'm pretty good with those. So let's see. All right. So we're kind of starting to see this start to emerge, right? If you remember, we started with just the entire silhouette in shadow and darkness, and from there we just started bringing out highlights, or started bringing out midtones to further develop detail in the bird. From here, I think I need a few more passes of the lighter value just to kind of help give me just a little bit more contrast, because once I go back in with the dark color, which I'm about to, which I'm ready to, I think, things should create even more definition and should look just a little more solidified. So I'm going to jump right in here. So I'm going to put some pretty good pressure right in here. Drop this in. And I see this here, and I can add some definition as I paint, or as I draw. I think of this is so much more as drawing than painting at this point. As I add, the definition in here, I'm gonna take special care to kind of get this little bump right in there. I don't know if you see that, right there. And continue to add some more of these darker areas here. Now, am I paying like terribly close attention to the actual number of these feathers here? I'm sure there's a technical term for what this particular section is of the feathers. In fact, I know there is. I don't know it enough. I'm aware that there is, definitely. But no, I'm not like trying to capture like literally every single little bump and little indentation. What I'm looking for is just a really, really good, clear representation. Even though I don't mean for this to be entirely hyper realistic, I do want it to have a fairly decent representation of the bird, so that there's definitely no mistaking that this is meant to be a hummingbird. But I definitely am not like trying to photorealistically or like take an approach to where I'm like so so caught up and mired in details that I lose sight of the overall picture, which is basically this tiny creature who's coming up to this ethereal, which in my world, the ethereals are practically, they're almost like deities. They're definitely powerful. Some of the more powerful characters, if not the more powerful characters in this universe that I'm creating, which is a fictional fantasy-based character, or can't say that right, fantasy-based world of these characters, which is, for me, a blend of like fantasy and superheroes. But I think it's interesting to have this play on like how innocent looking the hummingbird is and how small it is compared to this character that it's for some reason feels compelled to explore or come up to. So yeah, I'm just kind of filling in and trying to get the look and feel of the creature here, I should say the creature, the hummingbird. And again, we're just kind of just blocking in these little colors, kind of dabbing in things here. I don't, like I said, this is the final element to this painting, and I just want to, I want to get the picture in. I don't want to be bogged down by the details per se. I don't want to go in here and render the heck out of these feathers and then like say like, oh, check this out. If you zoom in, you can see all this little detail, because the painting is going to be viewed like this. You know what I mean? It's going to be seen at that scale. So I need to keep it like realistic, you know, to like keep it to where, you know, the eye is only going to absorb and register so much information that regardless if you're like literally painting like pixel for pixel, you know, cube for cube, you know, it's energy that is better spent elsewhere. In terms of like creating the overall impact and the overall finish of a piece. So let's see, I think what I'm going to do is focus in this area here, kind of toward the rear or the hind of the bird, and kind of drop in these little random shapes here, just to kind of give, you know, it gives the impression that, you know, there's contrast here. There's a definite pattern that I see in the image that I'm referencing here. We're going to kind of play with that and let it kind of come through here through the use of adding these little marks that help to give you that impression. So again, I think there's a little uptick right here in value, so I'm going to kind of paint that in or indicate that here with the value change. And you know, if you've seen, I did one other video, I think it was Avelina, yeah, it was, on her painting. I showed how I add colors in Photoshop with the gradient method, gradient maps. And I think that if you look at that video, search my channel on YouTube, it's Rene Arreola Art, you will see what I'm talking about as far as the color, the gradients. And you can also YouTube it in general. I think there's quite a few, I'm not the first one to do it. There's quite a few artists who have explained the method, and I'm fairly new to it, so I'm sure I'll learn more about it the more I utilize that method. For right now, it works just really well, because I get to do two things that I enjoy doing, which is drawing, which is what this phase always, it has become for me. The grayscale phase has been just that drawing phase. And I get to paint, which is, for my taste, like I said, I started doing acrylic, started oil, I've done gouache, done watercolor, I've done a lot of those different mediums when it comes to color. But like adding the color in Photoshop with the gradient maps has just been such a great way to introduce it, to get color into the paintings, make adjustments, and it's super fast. Paintings come out, once it gets to that color stage, after all of this is done, after all the grayscale painting is completed, it just like goes so fast. And the adjustments you can make to your colors, making different adjustments, or I should say being able to work on adding the color at that phase, is just so so tremendous. It's like once I get to that point, I can now I can really do color roughs there, color comps, and if I like it, like I can make them final. And again, I just think it's an awesome way to color. Coming, you know, with this approach of grayscale, with grayscale first. So I've got the marks in here. I'm just going to kind of smudge them up a little bit, blend them in, and I think that looks looking pretty good. So as I'm recording this on my iPhone, which is an older iPhone actually, just got the notification that the phone is it's been put into low power mode. So we're gonna see how long this lasts before I'll have to take a break and get it recharged. But I think you get a pretty clear picture of how the hummingbird is coming along so far. So yeah, you know, let's just keep going here and see what happens. Luckily, the configuration with the phone that I have over the iPad is configured in such a way as that I can easily tell and see if it stops recording. I used to record with this Nikon camera that I have, and the max it could ever do was only 30 minutes at a time. And sometimes I would hear when it would stop recording, but sometimes like I wouldn't. This is years ago, so when I was putting up some comic book work that I was doing, which interestingly enough, if you look on my YouTube channel, you probably will see some of it. But anyway, I wouldn't hear that the camera would die out. It would stop recording. Sometimes I would, because I would hear the shutter. I guess it would close. It's a DSLR camera, and I would go on, and like after 10 minutes, like some of the juicier parts of the drawing, you know, didn't record. So yeah, that sucked. With my iPhone, it's literally hanging over my drawing board, which is filming at an angle, the iPad, and I can look up. In fact, right now I'm doing it. Like as I move the pencil here, it's going to move out. I'm tapping the camera. That's the shaking. So that's how close it is. So I can just look up, and like the camera's like probably 3 inches away from my head. So that's cool to be able to see. Not sure how anybody else does it, but that's my setup. And so far it seems to be working well, although I guess the proof will be this video and how what it looks like once I get it unloaded to my desktop computer and start to see what the take looks like. So, but for right now, this looks pretty good. Cool. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna just keep going. This video is the camera's still going. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna pick a high value. You know, don't want to stay in the cool range. But now I'm going to start to add some of the lighter colors that you see here, which is what's going to give some pop to the piece, to the bird, I should say. The piece is practically done, you know. This bird is kind of like just something I thought about and wanted to keep it consistent with my last few paintings. Plus, you know, I'm just inspired to just create and add these creatures that the theme of, again, birds and taking flight kind of mirrors what I'm going through this year as an independent artist, now working full-time, supporting myself, and you know, with my wife as well. She's also very much supportive of my efforts here, especially in this first year as an artist. For sure, we're both super busy, you know, doing our things. You know, she runs her own business, and this art now has become a business of my own. So I'm taking this to that next level, right, on so many different levels, on so many different ways. And again, the ideas of flight, yeah, they're, you know, they're more than just it's more than just drawing this like hummingbird because I want to add it. It's also symbolic of like a lot of things happening right now with me and like kind of taking flight. And as like my wife likes to say, like spreading your wings. So it's definitely been an occasion for that this year. And it's definitely, I think, manifesting in some of these last few paintings. I think I've kind of always known that adding these elements to the paintings. These characters that you know, flight, because you know, flight is such a symbol for those kind of things, right? For like for freedom, or for going up, leveling up, those types of things. So that's kind of like, you know, the other reason for having these creatures in your, I keep calling them creatures. I don't know why I keep doing that. I guess they are creatures, but I should just, you know, it's a hummingbird. Maybe because it's in the Realm Ethereal, we're going to kind of think of them as something other than just hummingbirds. I mean, it could look like a hummingbird, but, you know, is it really? I think what will happen is it'll draw people's eye on the outside, from the outside, and they'll see it, and they'll like go, oh, it's a hummingbird, it's cool. But you know, if you know my story, then you'll see that it's more than just something superficial. Definitely has a meaning to it. So, all right, cool. So we've got our patterns slowly starting to emerge, right? I should say the form, thanks to these patterns that I'm now dropping in here. So yeah, we have our hummingbird coming to life. A couple of more of these dots that I'm putting here, which help to create the form, I should say, for the hummingbird. Will just really make things pop here. So this is coming along rather fine, I think. Rather well. I'm just going to keep plugging away here. You've seen the process. You know, I'll keep filming until the phone dies, I guess. At which point I can just charge it up and resume this. But this is so far is working out actually better than I could have hoped, to be quite honest. Always a challenge when filming, for me at least. You know, there are the videos that Procreate. Like right now, this is being totally filmed on the back end within the software. You can't see my hand, because I think that's what's cool about this particular approach to filming. But it does, will create like a recording, and in essence a time lapse if I wanted to speed it up. So those are cool too. So I'm sure that'll make the waves soon on the internet waves. Patrons will be the first to see it, of course. But for this part here, I'm just gonna keep plugging along here. I'm gonna kind of add some highlight here to the beak. Really pop that out. You can see that's gonna be a nice little highlight. Now that looks a little too firm, so I'm just gonna kind of gradually build it up right here. I got to be careful, because the moment I start seeing like the rasterized, I don't know if that'll pick up on the camera. It's getting too jagged. I'm getting too close to it. So I need to be able to back off. I need to be able to kind of maybe idealistically work from this period, from this range here. Okay, so let's see. We're still plugging along. iPhone is still working here. Okay. Like I said, I did put it into low power mode just a moment ago, maybe a couple of minutes ago. So we'll see how long that carries through. So what I'm seeing here is I'm building up gradually the lighter areas with the round brush, and that's a nice, oops, that's a little too bold. It's a nice way to just kind of gradually pull out those highlighted parts, right? So what I'm gonna do is actually I still need to keep on with this here, but eventually I'm gonna change the brush to another brush that I like using, and this is where we say goodbye to the reference as far as kind of being married to it in terms of following it like almost religiously, and where I start almost adding, you know, little spots or little flourishes here that are just like just because, you know, and I'll show you here in a moment, because what's going to happen is beyond this, and which this is almost done, and I'm quite pleased that I'll be able to get this done today, because I told the patrons it would be done this weekend, and it will be. The grayscale phase, that is. There's still the color phase I need to do. That's going to, you know, will in and of itself will include a couple of hours of work beyond this phase here, but as I started off making this next statement, I'm going to move into changing to a different brush so that I can start kind of playing with different textures. So we're almost there. We're not quite yet there. I need to work a little bit more with this same brush, like in this area here. You'd see this highlight here, this lighter portion of the wing. So we just need to get that kind of pulled out. We need to kind of pull that out a little more here, kind of give it a little more prominence. So we're just going to kind of cut that in. And one of the things I like about working in this method is that from the darkness, if you will, from the black of the body that we put down, and the wings and the beak and all that stuff, it's really cool to just kind of pull these little these little portions out. It's almost like I don't know, is it like sculpting? Maybe not. I've never sculpted. I shouldn't say that, but it just seems like they've always been there. It's just like the character or the bird in this case, like has been in silhouette. But you're like slowly just casting a light on it, and then all its parts are there. I should say the details are there, right? They've been there all along. So it's just a matter of having, the right amount of reference and being able to pull these things out as you're working, which I think is cool about this method. I mean, the character herself in this painting, I'll zoom out, did not start out that way. I usually, when I'm doing my figures, especially at that scale and that size, and maybe the scale has a part to do with it. I need more than just blocking a character out. I mean, it can be done, but I think in this instance, for speed, this is just, and for size, I think that's the main thing, the size of the character in this to relation to Ina. There's just so much. It's smaller, and so the scope makes it such that I can, plop down a dark block or a dark silhouetted character or form, I should say, and then just start chipping away at it, which is pretty cool. So let's see, the wings probably need a little bit more contrast. Need to lighten up some areas. So I'm going to go pretty bright on that, but the opacity, let's keep the opacity where it is and see what happens here. Camera's still filming, that's good. We're going to drop that in, thin that out. I'm going to make the brush size smaller. Actually, I need more. I need to lower the opacity because I want more of a gradual build-up. Okay, so see how we're just kind of making the portion of these wings just kind of pop a little more. Maybe I want to glaze a little bit over it. Give it a little more contrast, and then maybe just go back in and blend some of it together. And let's see, our little hummingbird character is coming along. Maybe just a bit more highlight in those wings here. Just kind of make that smaller. Kind of gone a little silent here because I can see that I'm getting close to wrapping this up, at least for this video. At least, I think what I'll do is, since I've shown a pretty good portion of what it is that I've done here, probably leave that where it is. We'll leave this where it is for right now, but hopefully this is giving you some insight into my method. As far as like you've seen me do it here, right? So like I'm using reference. You've seen me do this like from the start, and this is going to be, I guess this is going to be like almost an hour-long video. And maybe what I'll do is I'll put this talk-through version on the website. Maybe I'll do a time lapse, I should say. I'll put a time lapse version, as yet as a different post. So. Because this is pretty long to sit through and I guess if you're really hardcore and want to see it, you can watch this. And I guess technically this is almost like a training video, I suppose. But yeah, this is coming out. It's coming out well, I think. And then, oh yeah, there's a whole portion here that's kind of needs a little bit of loving, huh? So like, I got to work on this part here. I'm not sure. I guess these are more of its wings. I see one. Here's two. They kind of have like a fan-like orientation. They're kind of fanning out here. There's two. There's a third one here. Add that in there. And blocking it in. Maybe a little blend. And let's see, there's this here. Maybe a lighter one here. And what's actually happening here that I just noticed is we need to erase something here. Kind of cut. So you see this right here, how this little portion just kind of juts right in. It's almost like a, they call it like a cat tail or a mouse tail in airbrushing, I think. So we can just kind of erase this. I need to make that a little smaller, just kind of pull that in. So boom. All right, cool. That definitely adds a little bit more some dynamic in that wing portion down here. Maybe it's, yeah, I guess it's part of its tail, isn't it? Is that a word? Like a wingtail? I should really look this up. Let's see. That looks good. I think I'm good there. All right. And then there's this portion here. Like there's a lighter portion of its tails. And then we're going to just kind of cap this off right here. This is right here. I see that shape. You know, one of the things that you learn as you start painting is you learn to just kind of really make everything a shape. When you're starting out, as you continue, you learn like how to render things. But then when you're starting, you're like, just try to look at everything as like a shape, and try to mimic that shape, try to copy that shape, try to create that shape. And then you'll find that, like, if you're just approaching, the painting, the image, as just a collection of shapes, and those shapes just happen to be varying degrees of different values of a shade of black in this instance, you'll find that, like, okay, there's an order to this. So first it's like, what are the values? And then as you begin to, like, study that and add those in, and it all happens it all happens simultaneously, right? These things are not just like, it's not like here's one ball, okay, here's a second ball. All these balls you're juggling these things all at the same time. You're having to make a judgment on shape and value and form. But eventually what happens is, like, you have a separation of, like, the values, the shapes, and then your edges. And then once things begin to tie together, then you start thinking about refinement. So for right now, I think, again, I've said this a few times, there's a pretty good start to this here. Oh, the one thing I was going to do was change the brush. And I'm going to switch again to my Nico rule. And what I want to do is take my brightest bright, 100%, and I'm going to start kind of brushing this in right here. Oh, that's a little too large. I want to get, like, these highlights in here. And I really want to use my Nico brush, because it just has the Nico brush. Let me do a full on, like, boom, look at that. I like the way that looks. If I do it lighter and lighter and lighter yet, it just has this really nice, like, pastel texture to it, I think. And I like that look. Again, just because this is the element of the painting where I start thinking to myself, like, what is this about? I'm like, in this instance, it's about creating a sheen now. Like, I want there to be a little bit of attention tying into this hummingbird. And so my highest values, my lightest lights, I'm going to think about just like dropping in this sheen, almost like a glitter, right? At least that's like how I see it. You know, it's the best, it's all that I can do, the best that I can do to at least give you an insight into how I see things, and then, you know, yeah, the rest is up to the viewer. You can take it or leave it. So my phone just gave me like low power mode, 10%. So we'll see if I can wrap this up in that time. I'm getting too close. That was too close. So I'm going to undo that. I didn't like that anyway. Getting some highlights in here. Some really cool stuff happening down here, right in here. Let's see if I can maybe bring some of that to life. And we have, let's see. That's too bright. See what I mean? You're judging like form, shapes, values. And I think we're done. Wow, okay. Yep, that is it. I think what we're going to do is move this into Photoshop, and we will see you in color next time you see this piece. Thanks for watching.